Welcome back, everyone. This is our last presentation for this camp meeting. And we are still looking at the second amendment. I want to say that it's going to be a little bit challenging. Because I'm going to bring arguments that Elder Parmenter did not. I hope I'm not going to bring confusion. But I also hope that you will find them interesting or at least necessary. So we are going to start with a silent prayer. Amen. So I am going to start with a recap of what we've done yesterday. Yesterday, we explored the historical context in which the Second Amendment has been written. And how its interpretation has shifted from serving a militia to individual rights. Interpretation yayo yakashifta sei kubva mukuti iseve mauto kuti ichizouya kumarights. And also from bearing arms to carrying guns. Zvakare kubva mukuita bear arms nekuzotakura pfuti. And from defending the nation or the security of a free state to self-defense. Uye kubva mukuchengetedza security yenyika ukuuya kukuzvidzivirira uri munhu. So we look at three main actors who changed the public opinion on the subject. Saka takatarisa vatambi vatatu vakuru vakachinja muono munyaya. And this was the NRA, the Supreme Court, and the right wing with the Republican endorsing the gun lobby. Neve NRA, the Supreme Court, uye the right wing vachisimbisa pfuti muhurumende. In the beginning, I also placed the context in which I was looking at this study. Pekutanga ndakazoisawo zvakare context iyo ndaitarisa chidzidzo ichi nayo. And it is that we move from the right to the left. From the right to the left. Yaive kuti takabva kurudyi tichienda kuruboshwe. And the right and the left are characterized with an underlying principle, which is freedom or equality. Vekurudyi nevekuruboshwe vane maprinciples ari pazasi pezvavanotevedzera anova freedom kana equality. And Elder has spent time in our Vesper studies to break down the issues of the right wing by introducing us with those new actors. Elder vakapambadza nguva vachiti kutsemurira maissues iwayo kuti tinzwe kuti ku-right wing nekutu-left wing kune chii. And one of the reasons it was to identify what's their worldview and not to bring their worldview into the movement. Imwe mhaka yaiva kuti tigone kuidentifya kuti vanoona nyika sei kwete kuti tiunze kuona kwavanoita nyika mumovement. So it is in that manner that I am conducting my study. Saka ndomu and because I want to ensure that I do not bring worldview into my own position. I mean, their worldview into my own position.
Zvakare ndoda kuona kuti handizounzi muono wavo wenyika muposition yangu yandinayo.
Just a trigger warning. I will discuss heavy subjects like rape and murder. So please check yourself if you don't feel comfortable.
Saka ngozvizivai kana musinganzwi muri comfortable.
So the Second Amendment of the Constitution says the following.
Amendment yechipiri yeConstitution inotaura ichiti.
A well-regulated militia being necessary for the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed.
Kune militia iri well regulated, iri donzvo ravo kuchengetedza security yenyika, right yekunge vachiita bhema arms haifanhi kutorerwa vanhu.
So the discussion around the Second Amendment has now turned to be around self-defense and guns.
Saka discussion ye-Second Amendment yakazonyanya kurerekera kupfuti.
So much that it is viewed as not only a constitutional right, but also a fundamental and natural right that needs to be protected at all costs.
Nyanye haichaonekwi chete kunge iri constitutional right, asi kuti itori fundamental right yevanhu vanofana kuchengetedzwa.
And this idea is perpetrated by the Second Amendment fundamentalists.
Iyi pfungwa inonyanya kusimbiswa nevanhu ve-Second Amendment, vanova ma-fundamentalists,
who believe that the Constitution ultimately guarantees
vanotenda kuti Constitution mukupera kwazo
an individual right
inovimbisa right yemunhu ari individual kuti ashandise pfuti
in self-defense.
Mukuzvidzivirira pachake.
One of the way that self-defense laws have been implemented
Imwe nzira iyo ma-self-defense laws akaiswa
is through stand your ground laws and the castle doctrine. Yeah, so I'm looking at my quote, the quote number 1 about the stand your ground law.
Ndichitarisa nyaya quotation yekutanga yekuti stand your ground law.
That's the definition from Wikipedia.
Definition inobva kuWikipedia.
A stand your ground law, sometimes called a line in the sand or no duty to retreat law, provide that people may use deadly force when they reasonably believe it to be necessary to defend against certain violent crime. It's the right to self-defense.
Stand on your ground law. Sometimes inodaidzwa ichinzi line in the sand, mutaro muvhu, kana kuti duty rekuti usabva pamurayiro kana mutemo. Inoprovide vanhu vakawanda kuti vashandise nzira dzinouraya pavanenge vachi.
So this is a pretty broad definition that applies to your home and anywhere else if you're feeling threatened.
Definition iri broad inoapply kudzimba kwako kana kune imwe nzvimbo kana uchinzwa iwe uri threatened.
That was quote number 1, and it's under the part 2. I don't know where I was. Okay, so if you feel threatened and it's a question of life or death,
kana uchinzwa uri threatened, iri nyaya yekuti upenyu kana
or there's an instance of a kidnapping or a robbery,
pamwe panoda kuti pari kuda kubiwa vana kana kuti panoda kubiwa nemagororo kana mbavha dzasvika.
Well, the stand your ground laws apply and you have no duty to retreat.
Mutemo wekuti stand your ground unoapply. Hauna duty rekudzokera mumashure.
Because you reasonably believe that there was a threat and therefore you can use your gun for self-defense.
Nekuti unototenda kuti wanga uri kuthreatenwa ende unokwanisa kushandisa pfuti yako kuti uzvidzivirire.
And those stand your ground laws, they are considered self-defense laws.
Malaws aya ekuzvidzivirira anoconsiderwa mitemo self-defense laws.
And as of today, they are enforced in 38 states.
Pari nhasi anoshandiswa mumastates anokwana kuita 38.
There are some states like New York who do not have stand your ground laws.
Kune dzimwe states dzakaita kunge New York vasina stand your ground laws idzodzo.
But they have common laws where the judge makes the law.
Asi vane mitemo iri common apo judge vanogadzira mitemo.
That incorporate what they call the castle doctrine.
Unosanganisira chavanodaidza vachiti castle doctrine.
So I'm reading from quote number 2 on the part 2.
Tichiverenga.
And this is just a definition of the castle doctrine from Wikipedia.
Tichidefine castle doctrine kubva kuWikipedia.
So the castle doctrine is a legal doctrine under which people have no duty to retreat when they are in their home or in some places in their vehicles or workplaces. The castle doctrine and stand your ground laws provide legal defenses to persons who have been charged with various use of force crimes against persons, such as murder, manslaughter, aggravated assault, and illegal discharge or brandishing of weapons, as well as attempts to commit such crimes.
Castle doctrine, illegal doctrine, iri pa iyo vanhu vaine duty rekuti vasadzokera mumashure apo vanenge vari mudzimba dzavo kana mune dzimwe nzvimbo dzakaita kunge motikari kumabasa. Castle doctrine neyekuti stand your ground law inoprovide legal defense kuvanhu vanenge vachinzwa vachinge vaakuatakwa nevamwe vanhu vane mamwe criminals vakaita kunge vanouraya vanhu.
So if you shoot an intruder,
kana ukashuta munhu
it will be seen as self-defense.
Zvinoonekwa sekunge munhu kuzvidzivirira.
However, the question is whether the person reasonably believes that the person entering in their home or property committed a crime.
Asi mubvunzo ndewekuti munhu anenge achitenda here zviri reasonable kuti munhu uyu apinda mumba mangu ari kuda kundiguvadza.
So castle doctrines, they're a little bit less broader than the stand your ground laws.
Castle doctrine haana kunyanyotekeshera sezvinoita stand your ground law.
But it's still rooted in the belief that using force, including guns for self-defense on your property is valid.
Asi zvichiri zvakanyorwa mutemo wemaoko kunzi kushandisa defense yakaita kunge uchiita self-defense zviri valid.
Even though the outcome can be different.
Kunyangwe outcome yacho inogona kusiyana.
So I'm going to show you some examples of that you may have heard of stand your grounds law applied.
Ndichakushandisa mamwe examples apo stand your ground law pamwe makatombomanzwawo kaya akamboshandiswa.
Just going to share my screen for a minute.
Ndichangoshare screen yangu.
Okay, so the first one, and I'm going to read this from part 2 again, to quote number 4, number 5, and which one? Number 6 and number 7 and 8. It's just talking about the people that I'm showing on the screen. So, sorry, go ahead.
Ndichangoquota kuma-quotation mamwe ataurwa ndichishandisa panonzi vanhu.
Okay, so the first person that you may know is Martin Trevor, who was shot in 2012.
Umwe munhu anogona kufarira kuziva Martin Tavion akashuddwa muna 20.
He was shot by George Zimmerman
Akashuddwa 2012 naGeorge Zimmerman.
while he was going back to his father's place.
Apo aidzokera kuimba yababa vake.
And George Zimmerman used the argument of self-defense, stand your ground law.
George Zimmerman akashandisa argument yekuti ndiri kumira neground rangu.
To shoot the 17-year-old teenager.
Kuti ashudhe mukomana uyu anga ane makore 17.
And he was acquitted.
Akaburitswa, akaregererwa.
Yeah. So another example that you may have heard of
Umwe muenzaniso watinogona kunge takanzwa nezvawo
is the shooting of Ralph Yarl.
Kushuddwa kwakaitwa Ralph Yarl.
Yes, it happened on April 13, 2023.
Zvakaitika musi wa18 April 2023.
So he was at that time 16-year-old.
Panguva iyoyo aiva nemakore 16.
And he has a twin brother.
Ane brother yake mutwin.
Who was at a friend's house.
Aiva kuimba yeshamari.
And so their parents, they asked him to go and get the brother.
Vabereki vake vakamukumbira kuti aende anotora hanzvadzi yake.
However, he misunderstood the address, so he rang the wrong bell, the doorbell.
Asi haana kunyatsokubata adresi yake saka akaridza bhera.
And Andrew Lester. Andrew Daniel Lester, that's his whole name.
Andrew Daniel Lester.
He shot twice through the glass door.
Akamushudha kaviri.
Which injured Yarl.
Izvi zvakakuvadza Yarl.
There's a trial that will begin in October this year.
Pane nyaya ichatanga muna October kucourt gore rino.
And if he's convicted, he will be sentenced at least for 10 years in prison.
Kana akawanikwa aine mhosva anogona kuiswa mujeri kwemakore at least anokwana kuita 14.
And just so you know, Yarl is still alive.
Kuti mungozivawo Yarl achiri mupenyu.
Another one of example is Kaylin Gillis.
Kaylin Gillis.
She was a 20-year-old. She was traveling, but she turned onto the wrong driveway.
Aine makore 20 akaenda mumugwagwa usiriwo, driveway isiriyo.
And so Kevin Monahan, he shot her.
Kevin Monahan akafa amushuta.
Another example, and she's dead. She's dead.
Akafa afa.
Another example is Peyton Washington.
Umwe muenzaniso ndi Peyton Washington.
So they were coming back, Peyton and Heather, they were coming back from a competitive cheerleading competition.
Peyton na Heather vaidzoka kubva kune competition yevaya vanokuza cheerleaders.
Walking in the parking lot, they opened the wrong car.
Vapinda munopakwa mota vakavhura mota isiriyo.
And the person in the wrong car, so they realized that they opened the wrong car.
Vakazozviona kuti tavhura mota isiriyo.
So they turned away to go to the right car.
Saka vakazotendoka vakaenda kumota chaiyo chaiyo.
But the owner of the car, Pedro Rodriguez,
asi muridzi wemota Pedro Rodriguez,
he left the car.
akasiya mota.
And so they realized that he was leaving the car, so they were about to apologize for what just happened.
Saka vakaona kuti anga kusiya mota vanga kuda kukumbira ruregerero nezvanga zvaitika.
But he shot them instead.
Asi akavashuta pachinhambo chazvo.
They are just injured, they are not dead. Just for information.
Vakangokuvara havana kufa.
Another one, that would be the last one, is the shooting of Kingsley White and her parents.
Ndeuyu Kingsley White nevabereki vake vakashudwa.
She was playing with a ball, a basketball.
Aitamba nebhora rinobva musipare.
And unfortunately, the basketball rolled into the neighbor's backyard.
Bhora rakakunguruka richienda kuyadhi yevavakidzani.
And well, the neighbor shot her.
Muvakidzani akamupfuura.
As well as the parent.
Akamupfuura zvakare mubereki wake.
And she was 6 at that time.
Panguva iyoyo akanga aine makore.
She's not dead. She's still alive. And the parents.
Vabereki vake.
Yeah. And the parents. And the parents as well.
Vabereki vake zvakare vachiri vapenyu.
All right, I'll come back to that a little bit further. So now when we think of self-defense, there are different tools and methods that can be used for self-defense. We have martial arts, boxing, slapping, punching, and punching. Okay. Kicking, paper spray, bear spray.
Paper spray kana bear spray.
Taser.
Taser.
Bats, machetes, axes, and you name it. The bâton de baseball, like
kana kushandisawo matemo nezvimwewo zvakangodaro.
However, the gun lobby, the NRA, they focus only on guns as a mean for self-defense.
Asi vanhu vemutemo yepfuti vanongofokasa chete papfuti sekunge ndiyo yega chinhu chinoshandiswa kuzvidzivirira.
For them, self-defense is equal to guns.
Kwavari kuzvidzivirira zvakangoenzana nepfuti.
And even though it has been, researchers have noticed that guns is not the most effective way to use in self-defense. It's not the most effective tool to use in self-defense. Sorry.
Nyangwe vanoresearcha vakaona kuti pfuti hadzisiri dzakatsonyanya kunakisa kuzvidzivirira.
The NRA always use a gun right, the guns as a means for self-defense.
VeNRA vaingotaura chete nezvepfuti kana vachitaura nyaya dzekuzvidzivirira.
And why do they use only guns?
Nemhaka yei vaingoshandisa pfuti chete?
It's because there's this notion of empowerment, which we will come later on.
Inyaya yekuti paine pfungwa yekunge vanhu vachiitwa empower, tichadzoka kwazviri.
And even though a researcher says that it's not the most effective tool,
kunyange vanoresearcha vakativo haisiriyo tool yega iri most effective.
The reason is because they are solely used to kill.
Mhaka ndeyekuti zvinongoshandiswa kwoga kuuraya.
And gun owners, they receive very little training before owning a gun.
Avo vane pfuti vanoshandisa training ishoma shoma vasati vava nepfuti.
And also, they realize that it is not the most effective tool.
Vanoonawo zvakare kuti haisiriyo tool yega iri effective.
Because there are certain groups that are most likely to be victimized.
Nekuti kune mamwe mapoka anogona kuve mavhictim ezvinhu izvi.
And those people are women, people of colors, teenagers, and poor people in broad.
Vanhu ivavo madzimai, vanhu vane ganda rine kala.
And on top of that,
nevamwe vataurwa pamusoro peizvi,
it's not everybody that can access a gun.
haasi munhu wese anogona kuti ange aine pfuti.
Because it's an expensive tool.
Nekuti chombo chinodhura.
Which limit the people that can use it.
Zvinobva zvalimita vanhu vanogona kuishandisa.
And you have to be an adult to carry a gun.
Zvakare unofanira kunge uri munhu mukuru kuti utakure pfuti.
They've been also demonstrated that if the gun is not stored appropriately,
zvakatariswawo kuti kana pfuti ikasachengetedzwa zvakanaka,
it would cause more harms to the people near a gun.
Inokonzeresawo kuti vanhu vari padyo nepfuti iyi vakuvarewo zvakanyanya.
Particularly the children and whoever is in the surrounding.
Nyanye vana nevanhu vanenge vakatenderedza.
But despite the danger that guns can bring,
zvisinei nematambudziko anogona kuunzwa nepfuti,
in the self-defense culture, Americans usually they are fully armed. Sorry.
Muculture ye-self-defense vanhu vaine zvombo.
Actually, there's more guns than civilians in the U.S. population. In 2021, from the quote number 10, you will see it's a report from CNN. There are 120 guns for every 100 Americans.
Quotation yakataurwa neve-CNN, pane pfuti 120 muAmerica pavanhu 100 vega.
And the United States made only 5% of the world's population.
VeAmerica vane 5% yepopulation.
But they own about half of the world's guns, which is about more than 300 million firearms.
Asi vane pfuti dzinokwanisa kupfuura half yepopulation yenyika.
So I'm going to read a little bit from a book that is called The Cult of the Constitution.
Pane bhuku rinonzi The Cult of the Constitution.
It was written by Marianne Kate, who is a scholar in, I can't remember what. She's a scholar.
Rakanyorwa naMarianne Franks ari munhu wechikoro.
Yeah, and she's also a lawyer.
Zvakare ilawyer.
And so according to the, and this is from the quote number 13, if you want to know where I am. According to the gun lobby, this carnage can be only answered with one solution: more gun. So the more gun violence there is, the more people fear gun violence. And the more they fear gun violence, the more the gun lobby tells them that the only answer to bad gun violence is good gun violence. And as I mentioned before, when you are in a position of self-defense, if you have a confrontation, Many people don't receive a lot of training, which that will impact their judgment and also how they overcome biases before shooting. But despite all these evidences, the NRA continue to push the narrative that self-defense works and criminals fear armed citizens, and so do terrorists. Wait a second. The narrative that self-defense works and criminals fear armed citizens, and so do terrorists. However, there is a point that they are omitting. Is the fact that most mass shootings that take place in private residence, not in public space. Yeah. I'm just going to read a little bit of a sentence from the quote number 16. Which says that among the 60 mass shootings over the last 30 years, and this is an article from Mother Jones dated 2018. So they're looking at the past 30 years from 2018. So among the 62 mass shootings over the last 30 years that we studied, not a single case include evidence that the killer chose to target a place because it banned guns. In many of those cases, there was clearly another motive for the choice of location. For example, 20 were a workplace shooting. Most of which involve perpetrators who felt wronged by their employers or colleagues. And last September, when a troubled man working at a sign manufacturer in Minneapolis was told he would let go, he pulled his 9mm Glock and killed 6 people and injured another before putting a bullet in his own head. So even with this being said, there are groups of people that are more likely, there are groups of people that are more limited than others in the use of self-defense. And this group are women and people of color. And so to place my argument, I'm going to put everything in perspective in going back into a little bit of history. So in the late 1700s, the slaves, the free blacks, and people of mixed race were disarmed in case they used guns against their slave master. And I'm just going to read a little bit from a Harvard Law Review, a paper. This is the quote number 17. Mm-hmm. And I'm starting where there's a little 2 in the middle of it. I don't see if you see it, but there's a little 2. Okay, so a Florida law in 1825 authorized white people to enter into all Negro houses and lawfully seize and take away all such arms, weapons, and ammunition. In Dred Scott versus Stanford, Chief Justice Roger Taney argued that one reason Black people could not be citizens under the Constitution was that it would give to persons of the Negro race the right to keep and carry arms wherever they want. After the Civil War, the Black codes enacted in the South made it a crime for a Black person to have a gun. Even facially neutral laws were used in a racially discriminatory fashion. Martin Luther King Jr. was denied a concealed carry permit even after his house was firebombed. For much of American history, guns rights did not extend to Black people, and guns control were often enacted to limit their access to guns by people of color. Now reading from the Yale Law Journal. Oh, I don't hear you anymore. Okay. Talking about the women. And I'm reading from the quote number 18. The Anglo-American common law originally provided that a husband, as master of his household, could subject his wife to corporal punishment or chastisement, so long as it did not inflict permanent injury upon her. During the 19th century, an era of feminist agitation for reform of marriage law, authorities in England and the United States declared that a husband no longer has the right to chastise his wife. Yet, for a century after courts repudiated the right of chastisement, the American legal system continued to treat wife beating differently from other cases of assault and battery. And men who assault their wife were often granted formal or informal immunity from prosecution in order to protect the privacy of the family and promote domestic harmony.
authorities out violently vakadeclara kuti now isi kurowa century yapfuura masource aramba right yekurowa yekuchekera kuamerican legal system ingoti madzimai vakasiyana kuna masource apo maauthorities murume aine right yekurowa vakaramba macases varume vairova madzimai.
I'm going to read the quote that starts with marital rape. I think I put it in the same one. Marital rape, a former, oops, sorry, give me a second, please. Okay, marital rape, a former partner rape of domestic violence and sexual abuse by a spouse is illegal in all 50 US states, though the details of the offense may vary by state. Prior to the 1970s, marital rape was legal in every US state. By 1993, marital rape was a crime nationwide. Still, in the 1990s, most states continued to differentiate between the way marital rape and non-marital rape were viewed and treated. The law have continued to change and evolve, with most states reforming their law in the 21st century. However, there are still states where marital rape and non-marital rape are treated quite differently under the law. I'm just going to give a little bit of time for the Spanish to translate, a little bit longer. Okay, so there's another fact to take into consideration. Is that although people should submit to the authority of the government, there is a provision in the Declaration of Independence that if a government becomes tyrannical, people have the right to revolt against that government. The Declaration of Independence proclaims the right of the people to alter or to abolish government that has failed to secure their rights. The question is, was there or is there a group that has been subjected in tyrannical oppression? History will tell you that women and non-white men have repeatedly been subjected to state violence. And also, they've been denied protection against private violence. The institution of slavery, for example, permitted violence against Blacks, yes, against blacks.
semenza institutions yaiipfumitsawo violence kuvatema.
And this included forced labor, beatings, rapes, and murder.
Zvaisanganisirawo kumanikidza kusara, kurohwa, kubatwa chibharo nekuramba.
And there was no law for them to protect or having the right to exercise self-defense.
Panga pasina mutemo kuti vachengetedze kana kuti vaexercise.
And beating and raping slaves was not viewed or classified as a crime.
Kurova nekubatana sezvibharo secrime.
During the Jim Crow era, the Black codes did not permit Black men and women to use their self-defense or to get justice.
Munguva yaJim Crow vanhu vatema havana kubvumirwa kuti
Actually, the state turned a blind eye against lynching and beatings and rape.
state yakaita seisingazvioni
The state turned a blind eye
nekurohwa.
against lynching, beating, and rape.
State yakaita seisingazvioni panyaya dzekurohwa, kubata chibharo nezvimwe zvakadaro.
And today, discrimination still exists, and we see how the Black community is disproportionately targeted and discriminated, and faces more violence.
Ruchiripo rusarura ende tinoona kuti Black community inoramba ichingofesa violence.
Discrimination. Okay. And as noted before,
Sezvatamboona kumashure,
American law granted husband a right to chastisement,
mutemo weAmerica waipa right kumurume kuti arove,
and an exemption for marital rape.
vachipawo exemption kubatwa chibharo mumukati.
And women were subjected to a lot of sexual assault and domestic violence.
Madzimai vaienda pasi pedomestic violence neimwe yataurwa.
Yet in early America,
Asi kuAmerica yekudhara,
if a woman killed a husband,
kana mudzimai aiuraya murume,
she would be accused of petty treason.
aiaccuswa kuti akanga akomita treason.
Petty, this way. I'll write it there. P-E-T-T-Y. Pitiful. Oh yeah, pitiful, you know, petty. Did you get it? C'est correct ou pas? Ouais. Okay. Nowadays, women face generally longer prison time for shooting an abusing partner.
Mazuvano madzimai vakuwana nguva yemujeri yakati rebei mushure mekunge vashuta partner yake.
And they also face greater risk of sexual assault.
Vatori nerisk yakakura ye-sexual assault.
From the quote number 22, number 19, sorry. I'm just going to take a snip of each of them. So as of 2022, so this is from the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence.
The National Coalition Against Domestic Violence.
As of today, 1 in 5 women are victims of rape in their lifetime.
Mungora 2022, 1 mumadzimai 5 vaiva victim yekunge vakabatwa chibharo muupenyu hwavo kumunzvimbo yeAmerica.
Okay. What else? most intimate partner homicide are committed with firearms.
Kuurayana kunoitwa nevanhu vanodanana kazhinji kacho kunoitwa nepfuti.
And which one? Oh yeah, intimate partner homicide committed with firearms have also increased.
Kuurayana kwepfuti kuvanhu vanodanana kwakawedzerawo zvakare.
And between 2010 to 2017, it increased to 26%.
Pakati pa2010 na2017 zvakawedzera nepesenti inokwana kuita 26%.
And what else? 59%, that's the last we got. 59.1% of mass shooting between 2014 and 2019 were related to domestic violence. And in 68% of mass shooting, the shooter had a history of domestic violence or killed a family member or intimate partner.
59.1% yemamass shootings pakati pa2014 na2019 zvakanga zvine ukama nedomestic violence. Pa68% yemamass shootings munhu aishuta wacho aiva nehistory yekunge akanga akamboita domestic violence kana kuti
With this
akauraya
background in
munhu
mind,
wemumhuri kana kuti intimate partner. Tiine background iyi
if there is a
mupfungwa,
group that needs self-defense
kana paine boka rinonida self-defense
and more protection from the state,
zvakare kuzvidziviridza
that would be women and people of
pakustate
color.
vanenge vari vadzimai nevanhu
Yet they are the ones that are
vatema.
likely to be targeted and victim of gun violence.
Asi kazhinji kacho ndo vanowanzokutargetwa nekuva victim yegun violence.
Although they are not the group that demand and advocate for more gun rights.
Nyange vasirivo boka rinodhimanda nekuadvocata kuma-gun rights mazhinji.
A black male possessing a gun
Murume mutema anenge aine pfuti
are more likely to be seen as a threat and punished harder than their white counterparts.
anowanzokuonekwa semunhu ane threat huru, opapiwa punishment yakakura kupfuura muchena achiita.
And states that have passed the right to carry or stand your ground laws
Mastates anopasa maright ekutakura pfuti kana kuti malaws ayanzi
they
stand your right
experience
laws
more rapes and more sexual assaults and murder.
vanoexperiensa bata zvibharo kwakawanda masexual assaults akawanda.
So I want us to take an example of university and colleges
Ndotsva muenzaniso wekumayunivhesiti nekumakoleji
where most of them are gun-free zones.
apo nzvimbo zhinji idzi dziri mazoni asingabvumidzwi pfuti.
So they are considered as the safest places in the country.
Saka kunonzi iko ndiko nzvimbo dziri safe zvakanyanya munyika.
However, the campus carry movement
Asi campus iyi mucampus vanotakura
campus carry movement.
asi pane movement inonzi campus carry movement
Which is backed up by the NRA. They made their ways in university.
vakawana nzira dzekupinda mumayunivhesiti
And report actions
vachiripota maaction
that there are more cases of rape since the campus carry movement has been introduced.
Vachiti pane macases ekubata chibharo akawanda kubva pakauya movement iyi yekuti campus care.
And this is because women are threatened with guns.
Nyaya yekuti madzimai vanothreatenwa nepfuti.
Which make them less likely to fight but abide.
Zvinoita kuti vanzwe
That makes them
kurwa,
less likely to fight.
Kuti vasazonyanya kurwa.
But they're going to abide instead.
Asi kuti vangowirirana nezvavanenge vanzi vaite.
And in many states that the stand your ground law was promoted to protect innocent people.
Munzvimbo dzakawanda apo vaiita stand your ground law kuti vaprotecte
they've seen increase in the rate of homicide. This is from part of the report 21.
Muripoti vakaona kwakawedzera muripoti yemahomicide.
Moreover, when the stand your ground law is exercised,
stand your ground law kana ichinge ichishandiswa,
the end result is different for women than for men.
Mubayiro wacho medzisiro yazvo wakasiyana kuvanhukadzi nekuvanhurume.
Let's take the case of Marisa Alexander.
Ngatitorei muenzaniso wenyaya yaMarisa Alexander.
I'm just going to, just for you to know who is she. This is this lady here.
Ndiye uyo aiswa papicture.
So she's an African American woman who defended herself from a abusive husband.
Mudzimai wechi-African America akazvidefenda kune murume aive.
There was an order, a protection order against him already.
Pakanga patori ne-protection order yaiva against murume uyu.
Because he was abusing and abusive, and he beaten her multiple times.
Nekuti aiva abusive uye achiramba achimuabhusa, akanga amurova kakawandisa.
When she gave birth to that child,
paakabatsirwa mwana uyu,
she invited him to see the child.
Akamukoka kuti auye kuzoona mwana.
And when she went to the bathroom and looked at her phone,
paakaenda kubathroom akatarisa foni yake.
So he looked at her phone.
Iye murume uyu akatarisa foni yemudzimai uyu.
And he threatened her to kill her.
Akamuthreatena kuti ndikuda kukuuraya.
So Marisa Alexander, she managed to break through and went to the garage to flee.
Marisa Alexander akakwanisa kutiza akaenda kugaraji akatotiza imba iyoyo.
So she grabbed, but she couldn't open the door of the garage.
Asi haana kugona kuvhura door regarage.
So she grabbed the gun that she lawfully owned in her car.
Saka akatora pfuti yaaiva nayo mumota. Yaaiva nayo zviri pamutemo.
And so she came back inside the home.
Akadzoka mumba.
And she told him, "You have to go."
Akamuudza kuti wakufanira kuenda.
And he replied, "I'm not going anywhere."
Akati handina kwandiri kuenda.
So she fired a warning shot.
Saka akapa warning shot yakapfuura denga.
And he left unarmed with his 2 children.
Akasara asina kukuvara nevana vake vaviri.
No, unarmed, like ballistic. Right. So he called 911.
Saka murume akafona 911.
And the police arrested her on the spot.
Mapurisa akabva angomusunga ipapo.
She was denied stand your ground immunity.
Akarambidzwa stand your ground immunity.
and she was sentenced and convicted for 20 years in prison.
Akanzi aende mujeri kwemakore 20.
And the basis is that she was angry, and when she shot at her husband, she had other options available.
Basis yacho yaive kunzi anga akatsamwa paakashuta kumurume wake aiva nemamwe maoptions aivagona kuita.
So the response from the congresswoman in Florida, her name is Corinne Brown. This is from quote number 22.
Response yecongresswoman wekuFlorida ainzi Corinne.
She said, the Florida criminal justice system has sent two clear messages today. One is that if women are victims of domestic violence, try to protect themselves, the stand your ground law will not apply to them. Second is that if you are Black, the system will treat you differently.
Yakanzi Florida criminal justice system yakaunza messages two anga ari clear nhasi. Yekutanga ndeyekuti kana uri mudzimai unga uri victim yedomestic violence ukazama kuzvidzivirira, stand your ground law haiapply kwauri. Chechipiri ndeyekuti kana uri munhu mutema system inokutrita zvakasiyana. Saka pakazogarwa dare patsva.
But she was still denied the stand your ground immunity.
Asi akaramba achingorambidzwa iyo stand your ground immunity.
And she accepted instead a 3-year plea. Now, this case should have outraged the Stand Your Ground supporters and the NRA activists. Should have.
NRA.
Aurait dû. Okay, I'm going to repeat. So this case should have outraged the Stand Your Ground supporters.
Okay, Sanzi, case yaifana kutsamwisa vanosapota Stand Your Ground.
But the NRA remained silent.
Asi NRA vakaramba vakanyarara.
And they failed to advocate for domestic violence.
Vakatotadza kuadvocate domestic violence.
Now, if you take the case of George Zimmerman, I'll show you a picture before.
Mukatora nyaya yaGeorge Zimmerman yandambokuratidza picture yake.
It took 45 days to arrest him.
Zvakatora mazuva 45 kuti vamusunge.
And he was acquitted of the second-degree murder.
Akatoregererwa pa-second-degree murder.
Or you can take the case of Kyle Rittenhouse, if you remember that teenager.
Togona kutora nyaya yaKyle Rittenhouse kana achirangarira muteenager uyu.
That's the teenager, who drove to a protest in Wisconsin, and he shot 2 men and injured a third.
Ndiye akaenda kumaprotest akashuta varume akakuwadza mumwe.
And he was also acquitted, in 2023.
Akaregererwawo mugore ra2023.
So the outcome is that when women use self-defense or deadly force,
medzisiro ndeyekuti kana madzimai self-defense
against partners who are aggressive or abusive,
against mapartners vane ukasha kana kuti vanoabuse,
instead of receiving the protection that the law guarantees,
pachinhambo chekuwana rudziviriro runopuwa nestate,
they receive a greater punishment and are condemned for their action, even if their lives are in danger.
Vanotowana punishment huru, vototukwa nemaactions avanenge vaita, kunyange upenyu hwavo huchinge huri mudanger.
In the case of Marisa Alexander,
munyaya yaMarisa Alexander,
for the law to be in her favor,
mutemo kuti unge wakarerekera kufavor yake,
she was supposed to wait until the moment he comes at her with a gun.
aifanira kumirira kusvikira nguva iyo murume weaizouya kwaari nepfuti
and before she used deadly force.
asati ashandisawo pfuti yake.
So this shows that there's still biases in the judicial system against women and people of color. Sorry.
Pachiri nemabias mujudicial system against madzimai nevanhu vegana.
And this shows also that the gun lobby is not advocating for the group who needs these protections.
Zvoratidza kuti vanhu vemapoka emagun rights havasi kuadvocata vachiitira vanhu vanotonidhawo protection iyi yemagun rights.
In their interest serve mainly another group of Americans.
Interest yavo inonyanya kusevha rimwewo boka rekuamerica.
A group that has not faced the same level of prejudices.
Boka risina kumbosangana nelevel yakafanana yemaprejudice.
In fact, the cry for more gun rights does not come from women and people of color.
Cry yemagun rights.
Those who are advocating the Second Amendment prominently are white and male. And as I say, it's a group that has not experienced systematic discrimination throughout history. I'm just going to change position for a minute because I need to go on the other. Est-ce que tu vois mon tableau de ce côté-là? Yes, okay. Okay. Yet, in the culture war, white men, particularly heterosexual and Christian, they feel constantly under attack by the government. They are victims of discrimination. They feel that they are victims of discrimination. Because the government doesn't serve their interests and take away their rights. Therefore, they have remained cautious about other groups. And those groups are terrorists, criminals, or immigrants. And if you touch the Second Amendment, they become the one persecuted against the government tyranny. So when we talk about culture war, just for us to remember, it is an expression that rose in 1991. And it was introduced by James Hunter in his publication, Culture War, The Struggle to Define America. The struggle to define America. And it described what he saw as the dramatic realignment and polarization of American politics and culture.
Describe a dramatic change in culture America.
And there are those issues that polarize, the American politics and culture.
Polarize politics in America with culture.
And those issues are abortion.
My issues were abortion,
gun politics,
the pfuti,
separation of church and state,
patsanura kwekereke nestate.
Privacy.
Privacy.
Recreational drug use.
Kushandiswa kwemadrugs ari recreational.
Homosexuality.
Homosexuality.
And censorship.
Oh, yes.
So gun politics are part of the culture war.
Gun politics.
And one prominent figure or person of this culture war is a man called Charlton Heston.
Charlton Heston.
So just so you know who is he, you might know him because he played the role of Moses in the Ten Commandments.
Mukunange muchimuziva nekuti ndiye akatamba pamutambo achinge ari
Well, he
Moses.
served as the president of the NRA from 1988 to 2003.
Akanga ari president we-NRA kubva muna 1998 kusvika 2003.
He was the president. And he persuaded gun owners to view themselves as persecuted victims of the culture war.
Akanyengerera vaiva nepfuti kuti vazvione kunge ndivo ma-victims vari kupersecutwa muculture war.
So in the book, The Cult of the Constitution,
mubhuku rakanzi The Cult of the Constitution,
we learned that according to Heston, the truly oppressed class in America is white, Christian, straight, working class men.
tadzidza kubva kuna chausataurwa uyu kuti munhu anodzvanyirirwa zvakanyanya kuamerica ndivo vachena makristu.
Okay, so it's I'm just gonna write down. They are white.
Vanhu vachena.
They are Christian.
Vari makristu.
And they are straight working class men.
Vari straight, vari vanhu vanoenda kumabasa.
And working class men. Working class. Okay. So, yeah. So this is what he says. I'm going to read the quote from 24. 24. Heaven help the God-fearing, law-abiding Caucasian, middle-class Protestant, or even worse, evangelical Christian, Midwest or Southern, or even worse, rural, apparently straight, or even worse, admittedly heterosexual, gun-owning, or even worse, a now record carrying, average working thief, or even worse, male working thief, because not only don't you count, you're a downright obstacle to social progress.
Denga rinongobata Mwari wekudenga denga rinongobatsira vanhu vanotya Mwari, vanorarama vachengetedza mutemo, vari Caucasian, middle class, Protestant, kana kuti even worse, ma-evangelical Christian, ma-Midwest kana kuti ma-Southern, kana kuti zvitori worse, vanhu vekumamisha, vari straight, kana kuti zvitori worse, vanototi vari heterosexual, vane pfuti, kana kuti zvitori worse, NRA card carrying, average working staff, kana kuti zvitori worse, varume vanoshanda, nekuti havangokaunti chete kuti muri ma-downright obstacle
So,
to
third
societal
paragraph
progress.
it said, Heston identified the enemy of the Constitution as the feminists who preach that it is a divine duty for women to hate men, blacks who raise a militant fist with one hand while they seek preference with the other. Heston explained that the attack on firearms was really an attack on the Constitution and America itself. As I have stood in the crosshairs of those who target the Second Amendment freedoms, I've realized that firearms are not the only issue. No, it's much bigger than that. And according to Heston, nothing less than a cultural war against white men was raging across our land.
Heston aka-identify kuti ma-enemies ve-constitution vakaita kunge ma-feminists vanoparidza divine duty remadzimai kuti vavenge vanhurume, ma-blacks vanomukira ma-militant fists vaine rumwe ruoko apo vachitsvaka preference nevamwe vavo. Heston akatsanangura kuti attack kune ma-firearms yaiva attack constitution neamerica pachezvayo. Apo ndakanzwisisa kuti avo vanotageta second amendment freedoms, ndakazorealiza kuti ma-firearms haasiriwo ega issue, kwete itori nyaya, itori hombe kupfuura ipapo. Maererano naHeston hapana chinhu chishoma kupfuura culture chiri against vanhu vachena vaiva raging across nyika yedu. Saka Heston anoona zviri kuataka constitution.
Who see themselves victims because immigrants, gays, women, the poor, and other groups are granted rights and privilege at their expense.
Anozviona vari ma-victims nekuti vamwe mapoka akaita kunge magay, madzimai, ma-immigrants nevamwe vanowanawo ma-rights.
And Charlton Heston, who sees himself as the light bearer of God's law by his role as Moses.
Charlton Heston anozviona kunge ndiye anenge akatakura chiedza chaMwari neroo yake yaakaita ari Moses.
He has emphasized this victimization in his speeches by evoking God, whiteness, maleness, persecution, and heroism. I'm just going to write it down.
Akaemphasize kunge ari victim kwake.
God, whiteness. Go ahead.
Nekutaura zvaMwari zvekunge ari muchena. Zvekunge ari munhurume.
Persecution.
Achipersecutwa.
And heroism.
Uye kunge ari hero.
Do you see heroism? And all this, is tied to gun and the Constitution.
Zvese izvi zvinosungirirwa kupfuti uye constitution.
And what he did also is that he I'm going to say that he defined the source of the problem.
Akadefina panobvira dambudziko racho.
And it's women and blacks.
Akati vanhu vakadzi nevanhu vatema.
So, and despite not being targeted for physical violence or sexual abuse,
zvisinei nekutagetwa maererano nephysical violence nesexual abuse,
they see themselves as oppressed by an oppressed majority.
Vanozviona kunge vanenge vachitodzvanyirirwawo nemajority iri.
And this is not to say that they are not facing hardship.
Hakuzi kuti havasi kusanganawo nematambudziko.
This is not to say that they are not facing suffering from hardship.
hakusi kutaura kuti havasi kusafa kubva kune
But
zvinovaomerawo.
none of these problems are caused by being white, straight, Christian, or male.
Asi hapana matambudziko azvo ese anokonzereswa nekunge uri white, uri straight, uri murume.
But they hold the responsibility. I mean, the people who are responsible for their undeserved hardship are Black and women. Reading from quote 26. We are told, this is an article from the Washington Post. Here.
Iri article rinobva kuWashington Post.
It shouldn't surprise us that mass shooting has increased as minorities and women strive for equality. White men make up the largest percentage of gun owners and are ahead of people of color and women by double digits. In the NRA, the breakdown is even more stark, with white men accounting for twice the proportion they do in the general population.
Varume vachena ndivo vanenge and vari pamberi vekala uye madzimai nemadhidhisi anoita muNRA breakdown iripo inotoshandisawo apo varume vachena vanenge vaine twice proportion general population than in general.
Okay. Continuing reading, we are told this is the case because our society has incentivized white male violence from the beginning and has identified guns as the most effective means of exercising that violence. This lengthy history means that when white men feel disempowered, they are primed to resort to gun violence to reassert their sense of authority. It is not coincidence that the rate of gun violence and mass shooting in particular has risen in tandem with the expansion of rights and representation for people of color and women in recent decades. Mass shooters have routinely expressed white supremacist views and motivation.
Nhoroondo yakareba kuvanhu vachena. Iyi ndiyo kesi nenyaya yekuti society yakaisacrifice varume vachena violence kubva kwekutanga ende vakaidentifya mazanzi ekunge ndicho exercise violence. Nhoroondo yacho yakareba inoreva kuti varume vachena vanogwa kunge vabviswa masimba vanobva vangonanga pfungwa dzavo kuti vaite violence vachiita reassess masense avo eauthority. Haisi coincidence kuti
so hopefully it's good for everybody. So yes, people of color and women are looking to arm themselves for self-defense purposes.
People of color nemadzimai vanozviita kuti vaite self-defense.
But white males do not support this expansion of rights to this group.
Asi vachena varume havasapoti kuti marights aya apihwewo boka iyi.
Because they feel disempowered.
Nekuti vanonzwa vachitorerwa mamwe masimba.
And because of desegregation, civil rights and abortion rights.
Uye nyaya yesegregation nema civil rights nema abortion rights.
it generated a fear that now women and people of color can compete with white men.
Yakagadzira kutya kuti zvino vanhu vekala nemadzimai vagona kukompita nevanhu vachena.
So as a result, the advancement of women and people of color of their equality is viewed as an assault of the American hierarchy. And if white men struggle to get a job or go to university, white men struggle to get a job, it's because of affirmative action. If white men can no longer engage in sexualized commentary or comments about women, it's because they are silenced by a culture of political correctness. And so they use the Constitution to prove their grievances. And particularly the Second Amendment, which they weaponize. Now, not only this narrative has been supported by the gun lobby, but it also has been repeated by conservative right-wing mainstream. So as I mentioned yesterday, in order for the NRA to continue to sell guns, they need to be supported by a party. And they successfully became a key player in political dominance of the Republican Party.
Key player in political dominance party Republican.
Quote number 27. I'm just going to read the first paragraph. This intimidating display of weaponry isn't a bipartisan phenomenon. A recent New York Times analysis examined more than 700 demonstrations where people openly carrying guns showed up. About 77% of the protests, those who were armed represented right-wing views, such as opposition to LGBTQ rights and abortion access, hostility to racial justice rallies, and support for the former President Donald J. Trump's lie of winning the 2020 election. This was a New York Times article from the 2022.
New York Times article.
Oh, you can sit too? Yeah, you can sit on it. You just have to bring it back up. So it's a wave.
Times analysis yakafananirwa more than 700 demonstrations apo vanhu vakanga vakatakura zvombo zvipachena vakaratidza vakauya ipapo. About 77% yevanhu vaiprotesta, vanhu vaiva nezvombo vairepresenta ma-right-wing views vakaita senge position LGBT.
So the NRA encourages their conservative white men to perceive danger everywhere. They encourage their conservative white men to perceive danger everywhere.
Ma-NRA vanoencourage ma-conservative white men kuti vangoona kuti kwese kune danger.
And that danger can come from the liberals, the minorities,
uye kuti danger inobva kuvari
and
liberal,
also come from the
ma-minority,
socialists, the government.
kuma-socialist uye kuhurumende.
And so they also encourage their base to uphold God-given constitutional right to bear arms.
Vanobva vashandisawo ma-God given rights avo kuupholda constitution nema-gun rights avo.
And they do that by upholding the Second Amendment right.
Izvi vanozviita nekusumudzira amendment rechipiri, right amendment.
And the arguments are usually centered around white male grievance.
Arguments avo anowanzotenderera pa-white male grievance,
anti-government sentiments, paranoia,
paranoia,
and constitutional fundamentalism.
ne-constitutional fundamentalism.
Some even have a hand pocket copy of the Constitution that they carry with them everywhere.
Vamwe vatoriwo nekopi yavanotakura constitution vanenge vainayo pese pavanoenda.
Politically, after Ronald Reagan, the next president to speak at the NRA convention and get support was Donald Trump.
Politics, after Ronald Reagan, next president akazotaura ku-NRA aiva Donald Trump.
They supported him with $30 million in 2016.
Vakamusapota $20 million for 2016.
And they endorsed him as their presidential candidate for 2024.
Vakamusimbisa candidate wavo wa-2024.
And we know that Donald Trump's rhetoric is being also racist, sexist, and homophobic. In 2018 and 2019, we start identifying the role of Donald Trump in prophecy.
2018 and 2019.
And before it was recognized that he had a role, before it was recognized that he had a role in prophecy. But it became much more formalized in 2018. And we realized that it's not about a man, but it's about the whole republicanism. And this is not just about the Republican Party, but it's the entire right wing that now needs to be understood with a prophetic perspective. So it's not just the man, but it's everything that it stands for. And we know that Trump is opposed to I don't know if it's the right word, but egalitarian democracy or democracy. Because it does not agree that all people are equal and deserve to be treated as equal citizens. When we look at the culture war, the movement position itself for the defense of equality gender equality, human rights.
Position movement gender equality human rights.
Self-defense is a good thing.
Self-defense in chakanaka.
But the gun lobby and their advocates have an opposite view of that issue.
Asi vanoita gun lobby nema-advocates avo vane muono wakasiyana pakuvhii iyoyo.
They are not asking for self-defense for the good of all.
Havasi kukumbira self-defense zvakanakira munhu wese.
They want to keep their patriarchal position in society.
Vada kuchengetedza position yavo yepatriarchy musociety.
They want to maintain their supremacy, and they will fight for their privilege to remain above women and people of color.
Vada kuchengetedza nzvimbo vari pamusoro nekumaintaina privilege yavo vari pamusoro pemadzimai nevanhu vekare.
Especially that now more women and Black and people of color are arming themselves.
Nyanyanyanya nekuti izvezvi madzimai nevanhu vekare vakuzvishongedza nezvombo.
And they arm themselves because it's for legitimate reasons.
Vanozvishongedza nezvombo nekuti zvinenge zvine mareasons ari legitimate.
Because they are the groups who are oppressed.
Nekuti ndivo boka riri kudzvanyirira.
But what we have to also consider
Asi zvatinofanirawo
is
kuconsider
the outcome.
mubayiro
Who gets to stand their ground?
ndiani anovamirira ground.
Who gets to stand their ground?
Ndiani anozomira ground.
Who gets to receive immunity?
Ndiani anowana immunity.
Who gets to go to prison?
Ndiani anoenda kujeri.
Who gets to be killed for being at the wrong place?
Urayiwa kutanga panzvimbo isiriyo.
Who gets to be shot for opening the wrong car door or ringing the wrong bell?
Ndiani anoshudzwa kunge avhura dhoo remota isiriyo kana kuvhurisa dhoo isiriyo.
Who get to be shot because the ball accidentally rolls into the neighbor's backyard?
Kana kuti ndiani anoshudzwa kunzi bhora rakakumburuka richienda kuyadhi yenext door.
As of today, the justice system does not treat women equally on gun protection.
Pari nhasi
Women are more targeted to be victim of a male partner assault. The rate of murder and rape are actually higher since those laws are implemented. And they are not heard as it should be by the political right nor the NRA. And when intersectionality comes to play, it's even worse. And we know that with the Sunday law at hand, the challenge for women and minorities will increase. The Second Amendment remains a white man privilege with a unique interpretation solely attached to guns' rights. Yeah, okay. And it disproportionately discriminate women and people of color. And on top of that, they are in opposition to LGBTQ community and abortion rights. So I believe that when we look where this gun culture stands, when we take our decision to own a gun, we also have to look at the gun culture, where it stands politically and culturally. And culturally. And then you can also look where you stand politically and culturally. Because we must not understand that the Sunday law is also about culture and state.
Sunday law culture and state.
So with all this information in mind,
The information is in
you will be able to decide for yourself whether or not you want to carry a gun. Let's pray. God of heaven, we thank you for the camp meeting. We thank you for to bring those issues into the front line. Because they are complex indeed. And we need to take the time to look at them so we understand where we stand politically and culturally and take the decision.
Politics and culture.
It remains an individual, it will remain an individual choice. But I pray that the studies that has been presented during the camp meeting will help us to see where we should be. I want to praise the Lord for this camp meeting. I want to thank all the translators for their work. And also Vadim and Daisy for the help. Vadim and Daisy. And also Debbie and Annabelle for the organization. I want also to thank Elder Paminder and Elder Tabo for their messages.
Elder Paminder and Elder Tabo messages.
It's always a blessing to come together. And I pray it won't be the last. I pray it won't be the last. I pray all these things in the name of Jesus and for your glory. Amen.
Amen.